Welcome back again to the Imaginary Gallery. It is TJ, your host, and tonight's discussion is regarding a subject called impression management. And the goal here is to discuss impression management when it relates to like a regular non-Cluster B, non-toxic type person. And then I will go into how impression management takes on an entirely different form when related to the narcissist or otherwise Cluster B personality, because it's a technique that everybody pretty much uses, but there's a big difference between the two groups I just mentioned. I'm taking this information from one of the highly influential books that I got in my college days, this is probably outdated now, but the name of the book is Looking Out / Looking In. This is the 7th edition, so it's probably outdated, but it's by Ronald B. Adler and Neil Towne. But it's one of those things, one of those college books that I just kept for like personal use for real life because it meant so much. What do we mean when we say impression management? Well, I'll give you their words first. They say that impression management is the communication strategies people use to influence how others view them. So their goal is to describe to you many of the different messages that we aim at creating desired impressions. They talk about your public and your private selves. And they say, to understand why impression management exists, we have to discuss the notion of the self in more detail. So far we've referred to the self as if each of us only had one identity. In truth, each of us possesses several selves, some private, others public. Often these selves are quite different. The perceived self is a reflection of the self-concept. Your perceived self is the person you believe yourself to be in moments of honest self-examination. They can call this your private self because you are unlikely to reveal all of it to another person. You'll probably find some elements of yourself there that you would not disclose to many people, and some that you would not share with anyone. You might, for example, be reluctant to share some feelings about your appearance. Like if you think, I think that I'm really unattractive, or your intelligence. I'm not as smart as I wish I was, or your goals. The most important thing for me is to become rich. Or your motives. I care more about myself than about others. In contrast to the perceived self, the presenting self is a public image. The way we want to appear to others, not too different from what has been termed the ideal self. In most cases, the presenting self we seek to create is a socially approved image, diligent student, loving partner, conscientious worker, loyal friend, and so on. Sociologist Irving Goffman used the word face to describe this socially approved identity, and he coined the word, or the term, face work, not Facebook, face work, to describe the verbal and nonverbal ways we act to maintain our own presenting image and the images of others. He argued that each of us can be viewed as a kind of playwright who creates roles that we want others to believe, as well as the performer who acts out those roles. Goffman suggested that each of us maintains a face by putting on a front when we are around others whom we want to impress. By contrast, behavior in the back region when we are alone may be quite different. You can recognize the difference between front and backstage behavior by recalling a time when you observed a driver, alone in his or her car, behaving in ways that would never be acceptable in public. All of us engage in backstage ways of acting that we would never do in public. Just recall how you behave in front of the bathroom mirror when the door's locked with your hairbrush in your hand. Jesus! You'll appreciate the difference between public and private behavior. If you knew someone were watching, would you behave differently? Well, of course you would. It's an oversimplification to suggest that each of us uses impression management strategies to create just one front. In the course of even a single day, most people perform a variety of roles: respectful student, joking friend, friendly neighbor, and helpful worker, to suggest just a few. We even play a variety of roles with the same person. As you grew up, you almost certainly changed characters as you interacted with your parents. In one context, you acted as a responsible adult and said, "You can trust me with the car." At another time, you were the helpless child. "I can't find my socks." At some times, perhaps on birthdays or holidays, you were a dedicated family member, and at other times you may have played the role of rebel. Likewise, in romantic relationships, we switch among many ways of behaving depending on the context: friend, lover, business partner, scolding critic, apologetic child, and so on. Then they go on to say that the degree to which we act as impression managers is surprising. Some behaviors that hardly seem deliberate are really small public performances. For example, experimental subjects expressed facial disgust reaction to eating sandwiches laced with 110% salt saturated solution only when there was another person present. Yet, when they were alone, they made no faces on eating the same snack. Another study showed that communicators only engage in facial mimicry, such as smiling or looking sympathetic in response to another's message, in face-to-face settings when their expressions can be seen by the other person. When they are speaking over the phone, and their reactions cannot be seen, they do not make the same expressions. Studies like these suggest that most of our behavior is aimed at sending messages to others. In other words, impression management. You can see by now that much impression management is unconscious. The experimental subjects described in the last paragraph didn't consciously think, "Somebody's watching me eat this salty sandwich, so I think I'll make a face." Or, "Since I'm in a face-to-face conversation, I'll show I'm sympathetic by mimicking the facial expressions of my conversational partner." Decisions like these are often instantaneous and outside of our conscious awareness. Despite the claims of some theorists, it seems like an exaggeration to suggest that all behavior is aimed at making impressions. Young children certainly aren't strategic communicators. A baby spontaneously laughs when pleased and cries when sad or uncomfortable without any notion of creating an impression in others. Likewise, there are almost certainly times when we, as adults, act spontaneously. But even here, the decision to be spontaneous is often a conscious one, and thus a form of impression management. Next, they ask, why manage impressions? Why bother trying to shape others' opinions? Sometimes we create and maintain a front to follow social rules. As children, we learn to act polite, even when we're bored. Likewise, part of growing up consists of developing a set of manners for various occasions: meeting strangers, attending school, going to church, and so on. Young children who haven't learned all the do's and don'ts of polite society often embarrass their parents by behaving inappropriately, like when they go to the grocery store and they're walking by the corn and the child says, "Mommy, Mommy, that came out in my poop," right in front of other customers, and they laugh. But by the time they enter school, behavior that might have been excusable or even amusing just isn't acceptable. Good manners are often aimed at making others more comfortable. For example, able-bodied people often mask their discomfort upon encountering someone who is disabled by acting nonchalant or stressing similarities between themselves and the disabled person. Social rules govern our behavior in a variety of settings. It would be impossible to keep a job, for example, without meeting certain expectations. Salespeople are obliged to treat customers with courtesy. Employees need to appear reasonably respectful when talking to the boss. Some forms of clothing would be considered outrageous at work. By agreeing to take on a job, you are signing an unwritten contract that you will present a certain face at work, whether or not that face reflects the way you might be feeling at a particular moment. Even when social roles don't dictate the proper way to behave, we often manage impressions for a second reason: to accomplish personal goals. You might, for example, dress up for a visit to the traffic court and hope that your front, which is a responsible citizen, will convince the judge to treat you sympathetically. And I knew a girl who did that very thing, and it worked. You might act sociable to your neighbors so they will agree to your request that they keep their dog off your lawn. Sometimes impression management aims at achieving a goal, such as you act more friendly than usual when you're meeting a new person, so you'll appear likable. You could sigh and roll your eyes when arguing politics with a classmate to gain an advantage in the argument. You might smile and preen to show the attractive stranger at a party that you would like to get better acquainted. In situations like these, you aren't being deceptive as much as putting your best foot forward. All these examples show that it's difficult, even impossible, not to create impressions. After all, you have to send some sort of message. If you don't act friendly when meeting a stranger, you have to act aloof, indifferent, hostile, or in some other manner. If you don't act businesslike, you have to behave in an alternative way: casual, goofy, or whatever. Often the question isn't whether or not to present a face to others, it's only which face to present. Okay, so everything you've heard so far would be representative of, like we said, a regular person. Well, now we take it into the darkness, because this whole subject of impression management is basically hijacked and perverted by such Cluster B creatures as the narcissist covert, especially. My view on it is, like, let's just say you're hungover, and then you go to work and you have to impress your boss. Well, you're not going to be at work like, "Hi, boss." You're going to be, "Hi, nice to see you. Even though you may feel horrible, you're going to manage your impression. Well, that is, again, within everybody's reality, pretty much. There's nothing evil about it. There's nothing designed to hurt. It's basically designed to make a social situation comfortable. Well, when you switch over to the land of the Cluster B monsters, it's a completely different thing. The information we just heard would be regarding a person who's basically in touch with themselves, who knows who they are. And whenever they, let's say, switch masks, like at the employer, for example, they're not defrauding anyone. It's like everybody has their own set of masks, which they wear throughout the day. Like when you're at work, if you're a waitress, you're the waitress. When you're at home with your child, you're the mother or father, and so on. But those are all representative of actual roles that you are. Now, you may mix them around, like if you're really tired and your manager calls you, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm tired. You'll probably pretend to be your usual self. But the point is, all of the masks you're wearing for different social situations are all based in who you really are. You may be your tired self in real life, but you're going to play your happy, upbeat self when somebody important calls. It's, again, nothing fraudulent about it. Well, when we go to the darkness of these Cluster B monsters and narcissistic personality disordered people, they have hijacked this entire process and they use it as a tool. It belongs in their bag of tricks. Because we mentioned the public and the private selves. Well, for the covert, especially narcissist, their private self is a completely different person than the one that any such unlucky target may come into contact with. Because remember, when they meet their target, it's like they had a vacation from reality. They're going to slip into a new character and copy whoever it is they're with. Well, there's nothing real about that, but it's a tactic. It's like a tactic to manipulate and get things that it is not really entitled to. So it's interesting to read this from the viewpoint of like a regular person and then try to transfer it over to the narcissist and think it's not the same thing. Like when they talk about the fronts that they put on, well, it's like the narcissist is a soulless robot who grabbed a book like this and read it for a way to appear to look human. And they use impression management for specific goals. Because remember, in other videos we've discussed how with this type of person, every interaction is a game or a contest to be won. Which, of course, you won't be told this, but if you look at it from that direction, you'll see that's what they are doing. And for example, in the beginning, when you first meet the person, impression management is mixed in with manipulation and mirroring. So a lot of times they're quiet at first because maybe you caught their eye and what's going on in their head is, oh my goodness, look at that person. I could never score anything great with someone like that. If he or she knew what kind of evil monster I am, oh, I'll show them. And then they like put on their fake act, and it's almost like they have they feel like they're owed something. Like they feel cheated in some way, so they think, look at that person who would never have anything to do with me. I'm going to defy the odds, and I'm going to get her or him. And then they do these techniques which is what regular people do with the real lives, but in their case, they are motivated by an agenda, an ulterior motive. And that ties into the game they're playing too, which is never admit there's a game, but right from the start, they know that their target would have nothing to do with them if the target knew exactly what they were doing, like in this case, which is, I need to manage my impression. So their impression management is, as I said, agenda-driven. Well, see, none of this is real. None of this is genuine. It's all based on that ulterior motive. So when we flip back to the textbook, a regular person is just trying to get through life in a smooth manner. But when you've got one of these creatures, they are pretending to be different types of people. They pretend to be whatever they think their target wants. The problem is, of course, they usually can't do a very good job of it. And then that takes you into the next step, where they've pretended to be something similar to you. And of course, because you're genuine, you know what it's really like to be that way. And when you witness them or hear about them doing certain things that are just like, for you, an automatic, no, that doesn't happen, well, then you're pulled into the labyrinth of, you told me you were vegetarian and I saw you eating those chicken McNuggets. Now, come on now. And they'll be the ones to say, oh, those don't count. They're not real chicken. They're something else. I am a vegetarian. Well, you know that that's retarded. But that's the kind of stuff they do because they want to manage that fake impression of being vegetarian for whatever reason. It must serve some purpose. But you logically are going to be like, you're eating chicken McNuggets and you're a vegetarian. And you know, but the problem is, I've learned, it doesn't do any good to challenge them because they will argue, just like they do, that black is white and white's black, and even when you prove otherwise, it's a mess. That is how this impression management fits in, and it's just so sad to read how the real people use it, and then see how the narcissist has perverted the whole thing to try to achieve some hidden secret agenda that you'll never be told about, and it's just kind of sickening. Plus, it's sickening if you think about how pathetic these individuals are, that they never actually develop consistent personality that is who they are. It's like they have to switch characters, which is, if you ever see like someone you used to be involved with who is one of these, and you saw the way they were with you, and then you see them with their new person and think, that's not the same person. It's a character. It's an actor or actress.
I have to say, one of my fringe benefits is Hillary. She is so sexual. She's so sensual. She loves me, and I love her. I never thought I'd get the chance to get together with Her Highnessy. I'm just glad I did. She loves me. I'm the only one for her. I'm gonna be a first lady's lover.
Come on. Don't give me that look. You think I've lost it, don't you? Honey, I lost it a long time ago, but now I'm proud to say I'm normal. There ain't one thing wrong with me. I'm in the best health I've ever been in. So, your little theories about being something wrong with me is, your theories are wrong. Because I am 150% normal.